Question 1. When evaluating the implementation of Workspace, one unified endpoint management specialist for a U.S.-based organization, which approach best ensures compliance with relevant U.S. federal data privacy and security regulations? Option A. Implementing robust access controls, data encryption, and regular audit logging within Workspace ONE, coupled with a documented policy for data handling and retention that aligns with applicable U.S. federal mandates. Option B. Focusing on device inventory and application deployment features of Workspace ONE, assuming that general IT security best practices are sufficient to satisfy all U.S. federal regulatory obligations. Option C. Prioritizing the rapid deployment of Workspace ONE to maximize endpoint visibility and control, with a plan to address regulatory compliance concerns after the initial rollout is complete. Option D. Configuring Workspace ONE with default security settings and relying on endpoint operating system security features to meet regulatory requirements without specific UEM-level data handling policies. Correct answer is A. Implementing robust access controls, data encryption, and regular audit logging within Workspace ONE, coupled with a documented policy for data handling and retention that aligns with applicable U.S. federal mandates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the operational efficiency of Unified Endpoint Management (UEM) with stringent regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and security. The challenge lies in ensuring that the UEM solution, Workspace ONE, is configured and managed in a way that not only supports business needs, but also adheres to the specific data protection principles mandated by relevant U.S. federal regulations. Careful judgment is required to interpret and apply these regulations to the technical implementation of UEM. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive and documented strategy for regulatory compliance. By establishing clear policies and procedures for data handling, access control, and auditing within Workspace ONE, an organization demonstrates a commitment to safeguarding sensitive information. This aligns with the core tenets of U.S. federal data privacy laws, such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, if applicable to the organization sector, or general principles of data minimization and security found in various federal guidelines. This approach ensures that the UEM deployment is not only functional, but also legally sound and ethically responsible, minimizing the risk of data breaches and subsequent regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical deployment without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to inadvertent violations of data privacy laws by collecting or storing excessive personal information, failing to implement adequate security controls, or not having proper audit trails. For instance, a failure to implement role-based access controls within Workspace ONE could violate principles of least privilege, a common requirement in federal regulations, exposing sensitive data to unauthorized personnel. Another failure would be neglecting to establish a clear data retention and deletion policy, which could contravene regulations that specify how long certain types of data can be held. The professional reasoning process should involve a thorough understanding of applicable U.S. federal regulations relevant to the organization's industry and the types of data managed by Workspace ONE. This includes identifying specific requirements for data security, privacy, consent, and auditing. Before and during the deployment and ongoing management of Workspace ONE, a risk assessment should be conducted to identify potential compliance gaps. Policies and procedures should be developed in consultation with legal and compliance teams, and these should be translated into specific configurations and operational practices within Workspace ONE. Regular audits and reviews are essential to ensure continued adherence to both regulatory mandates and internal policies. Question 2. The risk matrix shows a high-priority security vulnerability requiring immediate patching across all managed endpoints. Given the diverse range of devices and operating systems within the organization, what is the most professional and compliant approach to deploying this critical update using Workspace ONE? Option A. Manually apply the security update to each endpoint individually to ensure precise control over the installation process. Option B. Deploy the update to all devices outside of business hours without prior notification to minimize user disruption during their working day. Option C. Initiate a phased deployment, starting with a small pilot group of diverse devices to validate the update, followed by a gradual rollout to the entire organization, with clear communication to users about the schedule and potential impact. Option D. Immediately push the security update to all devices simultaneously during peak business hours to ensure the fastest possible remediation. The correct answer is C. Initiate a phased deployment, starting with a small pilot group of diverse devices to validate the update, followed by a gradual rollout to the entire organization, with clear communication to users about the schedule and potential impact. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in Unified Endpoint Management, UEM, where a critical security update needs to be deployed across a diverse fleet of devices. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the security patch with the potential for disruption to end users and business operations. The risk matrix highlights the potential impact of both a delayed deployment, security vulnerabilities, and an unmanaged deployment, user impact, compliance issues. Careful judgment is required to select a deployment strategy that mitigates these risks effectively within the defined regulatory framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging Workspace ONE intelligent deployment capabilities to phase the rollout. This strategy aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing security while minimizing operational disruption. Specifically, it allows for a controlled deployment to a pilot group first, enabling validation of the update's stability and compatibility before a broader rollout. This phased approach is crucial for maintaining business continuity and adhering to any internal IT policies or service-level agreements that mandate minimal downtime. From a regulatory perspective, this controlled deployment helps ensure that the organization can demonstrate due diligence in patching vulnerabilities, a key aspect of many data protection regulations that require timely remediation of security risks. Incorrect approach is analysis. Deploying the update immediately to all devices without any staging or pilot testing represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the potential for unforeseen compatibility issues or bugs that could cripple user productivity, leading to potential breaches of service-level agreements and non-compliance with operational continuity requirements. It also fails to demonstrate a controlled and measured response to a security threat, which could be viewed unfavorably by auditors or regulatory bodies. Attempting to deploy the update manually to each device is also professionally unacceptable. This method is not only inefficient and prone to human error, but also fails to leverage the capabilities of a UEM solution like Workspace ONE. It bypasses the automated compliance and reporting features, making it impossible to accurately track deployment status or ensure consistent application of the patch across all endpoints. This lack of auditable control can lead to regulatory noncompliance, particularly in environments with strict change management and audit trail requirements. Forcing the update on all devices during business hours without user notification or a phased rollout is a direct violation of user experience best practices and can lead to significant operational disruption. While seemingly a quick fix, it ignores the potential impact on critical business processes and user productivity. This can indirectly lead to compliance issues if the disruption causes a failure to meet service delivery obligations or data processing timelines mandated by regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach UEM implementation challenges by first understanding the full scope of the risk matrix, considering both technical and operational impacts. The decision-making process should involve 1. Assessing the criticality of the update and the associated risks. 2. Evaluating the available UEM features for controlled deployment, e.g., phased rollouts, smart groups, compliance policies. 3. Consulting with stakeholders to understand potential business impacts and user concerns. 4. Developing a deployment plan that prioritizes security while minimizing disruption, often involving a pilot phase. 5. Establishing clear communication channels with end users regarding the deployment schedule and any expected impact. 6. Ensuring robust monitoring and rollback capabilities are in place. This systematic approach ensures that security objectives are met while maintaining operational integrity and adhering to professional and regulatory standards. Question 3. Risk assessment procedures indicate a critical security vulnerability has been identified in a widely used enterprise application deployed across a diverse range of managed mobile devices. The vendor has released an urgent patch, What is the most professional and compliant approach to deploying this patch across the organization's Workspace One managed fleet? Option A. Communicate the vulnerability to all end users and instruct them to manually update the application on their devices at their earliest convenience. Option B. Immediately push the patch to all managed devices simultaneously to ensure the fastest possible remediation of the vulnerability. Option C. Postpone the patch deployment until a less disruptive period, such as a scheduled maintenance window, to minimize user impact. Option D. Implement a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot group of devices, monitoring for issues, and gradually expanding the deployment while maintaining rollback capabilities. Correct answer is D. Implement a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot group of devices, monitoring for issues, and gradually expanding the deployment while maintaining rollback capabilities. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise mobility management, where a critical security update for a widely used application needs to be deployed across a diverse fleet of managed devices. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the security fix with the potential disruption to end users and business operations. The organization must ensure compliance with data protection regulations, which mandate timely patching of vulnerabilities to prevent data breaches, while also minimizing downtime and maintaining user productivity. The sheer volume and variety of devices, coupled with varying network conditions and user access levels, add layers of complexity to a successful and compliant deployment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a phased rollout strategy. This involves testing the update on a small, representative subset of devices first to identify any compatibility issues or unforeseen problems. Once validated, the deployment is gradually expanded to larger groups, allowing for continuous monitoring and rollback capabilities if necessary. This method aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation, ensuring that potential issues are contained and addressed before impacting the entire user base. From a regulatory perspective, this approach demonstrates due diligence in protecting sensitive data by proactively addressing security vulnerabilities in a controlled and systematic manner, thereby minimizing the risk of non-compliance with data protection mandates. It also supports business continuity by reducing the likelihood of widespread service disruptions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately pushing the update to all devices without prior testing. This is a high-risk strategy that could lead to widespread application failures, device instability, or data corruption, potentially violating data protection regulations by failing to adequately safeguard data integrity and availability. It also demonstrates a lack of professional judgment in managing IT infrastructure and security. Another incorrect approach is to delay the update indefinitely due to fear of disruption. While avoiding disruption is a valid concern, failing to address critical security vulnerabilities leaves the organization exposed to significant security risks, including data breaches. This inaction would be a direct violation of regulatory requirements that mandate timely remediation of known security flaws, leading to potential fines and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on end users to manually update the application. This approach is unreliable, as it places the burden of security on individuals who may not have the technical expertise or time to perform the update promptly. This leads to a fragmented security posture, leaving many devices vulnerable and increasing the likelihood of a security incident, which would be a failure to meet regulatory obligations for maintaining a secure environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to deployment. This involves understanding the criticality of the security update, assessing the potential impact of both deployment and non-deployment, and planning the rollout in a manner that minimizes risk to the organization and its data. A structured change management process, including testing, phased deployment, and clear communication, is essential. When faced with such a challenge, professionals should consult relevant security advisories, internal policies, and regulatory guidance to inform their decision-making process. The goal is to achieve a balance between security imperatives, operational efficiency, and regulatory compliance. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate a critical security vulnerability has been identified in a widely used application, requiring an immediate update across all managed endpoints. The organization's device fleet includes a mix of corporate-owned and bring-your-own device (BYOD) endpoints, running various versions of Windows, Mac OS, and Android, with diverse user-installed applications and configurations. What is the most prudent approach to deploying this critical security update using Workspace ONE UEM? Option A. Postpone the update deployment until a less disruptive time, such as during a scheduled maintenance window, to minimize potential user impact. Option B. Immediately deploy the update to all devices simultaneously to ensure the fastest possible mitigation of the security vulnerability. Option C. Initiate a phased rollout of the update, starting with a small pilot group of diverse devices and user types, closely monitoring for any issues before proceeding with broader deployment. Option D. Deploy the update only to devices that are currently online and connected to the corporate network, excluding BYOD devices to avoid potential user complaints. The correct answer is C. Initiate a phased rollout of the update, starting with a small pilot group of diverse devices and user types, closely monitoring for any issues before proceeding with broader deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in Unified Endpoint Management, UEM, where a critical security update needs to be deployed across a diverse fleet of devices, including those with varying operating system versions and user-defined configurations. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the security patch with the potential for disruption to end-user productivity and the need to maintain compliance with internal IT policies and potentially external regulatory requirements. Though for this exam, we focus solely on the UEM specialist's role within the Workspace ONE framework and its inherent best practices, assuming no specific external jurisdiction mandates are provided for this question. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased rollout strategy. This allows for early detection of compatibility issues or unintended consequences on a smaller subset of devices before a full-scale deployment. This iterative testing and validation process minimizes the risk of widespread service disruption, data loss, or security vulnerabilities arising from an untested update. It aligns with the principle of least privilege and controlled change management, which are fundamental to robust IT operations and UEM best practices. An incorrect approach that involves an immediate, unvalidated mass deployment fails to account for the inherent complexities of a heterogeneous device environment. This could lead to significant operational downtime, user frustration, and potential data corruption, all of which undermine the effectiveness of the UEM solution and the IT department's credibility. Such an approach also risks introducing new security vulnerabilities if the update itself has unforeseen issues that are only discovered after widespread deployment. Another incorrect approach, delaying the deployment indefinitely due to fear of disruption, represents a failure to address a critical security risk. This inaction leaves the organization vulnerable to known threats, which is a direct contravention of basic IT security principles and the core purpose of a UEM solution. This passive stance can have severe consequences, including data breaches and reputational damage. Finally, an approach that bypasses standard change management and testing protocols, even for a security update, introduces an unacceptable level of risk. While speed is important for security patches, it should not come at the expense of due diligence. This can lead to unintended system instability or conflicts with existing applications and configurations, negating the intended security benefit and potentially creating new problems. The professional reasoning process for this situation involves 1. Understanding the criticality of the security update and the associated risks of inaction. 2. Assessing the diversity and complexity of the managed endpoint environment. 3. Evaluating potential deployment strategies, considering phased rollouts, pilot groups, and rollback plans. 4. Prioritizing methods that minimize disruption while effectively mitigating the security threat. 5. Adhering to established IT change management and testing best practices. Question 5. Compliance review shows that the organization's current Workspace ONE Unified Endpoint Management strategy has been flagged for potential noncompliance with data protection regulations due to a lack of granular control over application access and data exfiltration pathways on managed devices. The security team needs to implement a more robust security posture. Which of the following approaches best addresses these compliance concerns while maintaining operational efficiency? Option A. Establish a policy where security incidents are primarily addressed based on user-reported issues, and security policies are updated reactively in response to confirmed breaches. Option B. Immediately deploy a universal application blocking policy for all non-essential software across all managed endpoints to minimize potential attack vectors and data leakage. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify critical data and applications. Then implement role-based access controls and application, blacklisting/whitelisting policies within Workspace ONE, coupled with data loss prevention, DLP, policies and continuous monitoring for anomalous activity. Option D. Focus on implementing advanced endpoint detection and response (EDR) solutions to detect and respond to threats in real time, assuming that robust detection will mitigate most compliance risks. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify critical data and applications. Then implement role-based access controls and application blacklisting/whitelisting policies within Workspace ONE, coupled with data loss prevention, DLP, policies and continuous monitoring for anomalous activity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint management, balancing user productivity and access to necessary applications with the stringent security and compliance requirements mandated by regulatory frameworks. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing controls that effectively mitigate risks without unduly hindering legitimate business operations. The need for a robust, yet adaptable, security posture is paramount, especially when dealing with sensitive data or regulated industries. The pressure to maintain operational efficiency while adhering to compliance standards requires careful consideration of technical capabilities, user impact, and the evolving threat landscape. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of granular access controls and continuous monitoring, directly aligning with the principles of least privilege and defense in depth, which are foundational to many regulatory compliance frameworks. By first identifying critical assets and data, then implementing policies that restrict access to only what is necessary for specific roles, and finally establishing robust logging and alerting mechanisms, the organization builds a secure environment that is auditable and adaptable. This methodology ensures that security measures are proportionate to the risk, minimizing disruption to end users while maximizing protection. This aligns with the spirit of regulations that require organizations to protect sensitive information and maintain the integrity of their systems. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a blanket ban on all non-essential applications without a thorough risk assessment and user impact analysis is a regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding business needs and could lead to operational paralysis, violating implicit requirements for business continuity. Furthermore, it fails to apply the principle of proportionality in security controls. Deploying advanced threat detection without first establishing baseline security controls and access policies is also a failure. It represents a reactive rather than proactive security stance, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities exposed while focusing on sophisticated, but perhaps unnecessary, defenses. This approach neglects the fundamental requirement to secure the perimeter and manage access effectively, which are often explicit in compliance mandates. Relying solely on user-reported incidents for security policy updates ignores the proactive and preventative obligations inherent in regulatory frameworks. This approach is reactive, inefficient, and fails to address systemic risks. It can lead to repeated breaches and a failure to meet audit requirements that demand demonstrable, ongoing security efforts. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such challenges by adopting a risk-based methodology. This involves understanding the organization's specific regulatory obligations, identifying critical assets and data, assessing potential threats and vulnerabilities, and then designing and implementing controls that are proportionate to the identified risks. Continuous monitoring, regular policy review, and user feedback loops are essential for maintaining an effective and compliant security posture. The decision-making process should prioritize a layered security approach, starting with foundational controls and progressively adding more sophisticated measures as needed, always with a clear understanding of the business impact and regulatory implications. Question 6. The evaluation methodology shows that the automated deployment of critical security policies within Workspace ONE unified endpoint management is intended to optimize operational efficiency. However, a key consideration for process optimization in this context is ensuring that automated changes do not introduce unintended security vulnerabilities or compliance risks. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency with robust oversight for automated security policy deployments? Option A. Deploy automated policy changes to a small subset of non-critical endpoints first, and if no issues are detected after a significant period, proceed with full deployment without further human review. Option B. Automate the deployment of all policies, including critical security ones, and then manually review every single deployed policy on each endpoint to confirm its correctness. Option C. Implement a workflow where automated policy deployments are automatically pushed to all endpoints without any intermediate human review, relying solely on post-deployment audits to identify any issues. Option D. Design the automation to include a mandatory human approval step for all critical security policy changes before they are deployed to endpoints, allowing for a final validation of configurations against security baselines. Correct answer is C. Implement a workflow where automated policy deployments are automatically pushed to all endpoints without any intermediate human review, relying solely on post-deployment audits to identify any issues. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in unified endpoint management, UEM, where the drive for efficiency can inadvertently lead to over-automation, bypassing critical human oversight and potentially creating security vulnerabilities or compliance gaps. The professional challenge lies in balancing the benefits of automated processes with the necessity of human validation, especially when dealing with sensitive endpoint configurations and data. Careful judgment is required to identify the optimal point of intervention for human review without hindering the overall efficiency gains. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it acknowledges that while automation is key to process optimization, critical security and compliance checks require human expertise and contextual understanding. Specifically, in the context of Workspace 1 UEM, automated policy deployment without a final human review step for critical security configurations, like data encryption or access controls, risks misconfigurations that could violate data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, depending on the jurisdiction. Though for this exam, we focus on general UEM best practices as per the syllabus. This approach ensures that the automated process is validated against established security baselines and organizational policies before impacting endpoints, thereby upholding the principle of least privilege and data integrity. An incorrect approach that deploys automated policy changes without any human review fails to account for potential errors in the automation script or unexpected interactions with existing configurations. This can lead to regulatory noncompliance if, for instance, an automated change inadvertently weakens security controls, exposing sensitive data and violating data protection mandates. Another incorrect approach that involves manual review of every single automated change, regardless of its criticality, negates the benefits of process optimization and leads to significant inefficiencies, potentially delaying critical security updates and impacting operational agility. This is not necessarily a direct regulatory failure, but a failure in achieving the stated goal of process optimization. A third incorrect approach that relies solely on post-deployment audits to catch errors is reactive rather than proactive. While audits are necessary, waiting for an audit to discover a critical misconfiguration that has already impacted endpoints is a significant security and compliance failure, as it implies a lack of due diligence in the deployment process. The professional reasoning process should involve a risk-based assessment. For process optimization in UEM, professionals should first identify critical configuration areas that have a high impact on security and compliance. For these areas, a hybrid approach of automated deployment followed by targeted human validation is ideal. For less critical configurations, full automation might be acceptable, with periodic spot checking. The decision-making framework should prioritize maintaining a strong security posture and adherence to relevant organizational policies and regulatory requirements, ensuring that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of security or compliance. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that a key challenge in deploying Workspace 1 unified endpoint management is balancing the need for comprehensive device control with the imperative to protect user privacy and comply with data protection regulations. Considering a scenario where employees handle varying levels of sensitive customer information, what is the most appropriate strategy for configuring device policies within Workspace ONE UEM to ensure both operational efficiency and regulatory adherence? Option A. Apply a single, highly restrictive policy to all managed devices to ensure maximum security and compliance, irrespective of individual user needs or data types. Option B. Implement granular policies tailored to specific user roles and the sensitivity of data they access, ensuring that management controls and data protection measures are proportionate to the risk. Option C. Utilize a lenient policy for all devices, trusting users to manage their data responsibly and adhere to company guidelines without explicit technical enforcement. Option D. Rely exclusively on user self-attestation for data sensitivity classification and policy compliance, with minimal direct technical oversight from the UEM solution. The correct answer is B. Implement granular policies tailored to specific user roles and the sensitivity of data they access, ensuring that management controls and data protection measures are proportionate to the risk. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between an organization's desire for streamlined device management and the critical need to protect sensitive user data and comply with data privacy regulations. The Unified Endpoint Management (UM) specialist must balance the efficiency gains of broad policy application with the granular requirements of data protection, especially when dealing with diverse user roles and data sensitivity levels. Careful judgment is required to avoid overcollection or inappropriate access to personal information, which could lead to significant legal and reputational damage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based strategy aligned with data privacy principles. By implementing granular policies based on user roles and data sensitivity, the organization ensures that only necessary data is managed and protected according to its classification. This aligns with the principle of data minimization, a cornerstone of many data protection frameworks, which mandates collecting and processing only the data that is adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary for the purposes for which it is processed. This proactive approach minimizes the attack surface and reduces the likelihood of data breaches or unauthorized access, thereby upholding user trust and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that involves applying a single, highly restrictive policy to all devices, regardless of user role or data sensitivity, fails to acknowledge the varying needs and risks associated with different user groups. This can lead to user frustration, reduced productivity, and may even hinder legitimate business operations. From a regulatory perspective, while seemingly protective, it might also violate principles of proportionality if the restrictions are excessive and not justified by the actual risk. Another incorrect approach, applying a lenient policy to all devices, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the potential for sensitive data to reside on any device and exposes the organization to substantial risks of data breaches. Noncompliance with data protection laws, such as those requiring specific security measures for personal data, and erosion of user privacy. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in assessing and mitigating risks associated with endpoint management. A third incorrect approach, relying solely on user self-reporting for data sensitivity and policy adherence, is professionally unacceptable. This method is inherently unreliable and shifts the burden of compliance onto users who may lack the technical expertise or understanding of regulatory requirements. It creates a significant compliance gap and exposes the organization to regulatory penalties and ethical breaches by failing to implement robust, centrally managed controls. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment that identifies sensitive data types, user roles, and potential threats. This assessment should inform the development of a tiered policy framework within Workspace ONE UEM. Regular audits and reviews of policy effectiveness and compliance are essential, alongside clear communication and training for both IT staff and end users regarding data protection responsibilities and the rationale behind implemented policies. Question 8. The audit findings indicate that the current endpoint security posture managed by Workspace ONE is insufficient, with a significant number of devices not adhering to critical security configurations such as data encryption and strong authentication protocols. Considering the need to immediately address these vulnerabilities, while minimizing disruption to end-user operations. Which of the following strategies best aligns with professional best practices for unified endpoint management? Option A. Focus on addressing only the most critical security vulnerabilities identified in the audit by implementing ad hoc, custom configurations for affected devices, without altering the broader policy framework. Option B. Prioritize the deployment of essential security policies, including mandatory data encryption and multi-factor authentication, to all managed endpoints, followed by a phased rollout of less critical security configurations based on device type and user role. Option C. Defer any significant changes to the current Workspace ONE configuration until a comprehensive, organization-wide security policy overhaul can be completed, which may take several months. Option D. Immediately enforce all available security policies within Workspace ONE across the entire endpoint fleet to ensure maximum compliance and mitigate all potential risks simultaneously. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the deployment of essential security policies, including mandatory data encryption and multi-factor authentication, to all managed endpoints, followed by a phased rollout of less critical security configurations based on device type and user role. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between maintaining robust security posture and ensuring user productivity and access to necessary resources. The audit findings highlight a potential gap in the organization's ability to effectively manage and secure its diverse endpoint fleet using Workspace ONE. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for strict compliance with security policies against the operational realities of a dynamic workforce and varied device types. Careful judgment is required to implement solutions that are both effective from a security standpoint and practical for end users and IT administrators. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the audit findings by proposing a phased, risk-based implementation of Workspace ONE policies. This aligns with the principles of effective endpoint management, which prioritize security controls based on the sensitivity of data and the risk profile of the device and user. By focusing on critical security controls first, such as data encryption and strong authentication, and then progressively implementing broader policies, the organization can mitigate immediate risks without causing undue disruption. This methodical approach also allows for continuous monitoring and adjustment, ensuring that policies remain relevant and effective. Furthermore, this strategy is consistent with the general principles of IT governance and risk management, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate data protection and security. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on deploying all available security policies immediately without regard for user impact or device compatibility would be professionally unacceptable. This would likely lead to widespread user frustration, decreased productivity, and potential system instability, undermining the very security objectives it aims to achieve. Such an approach could also violate ethical considerations related to user experience and operational efficiency. Another incorrect approach that involves ignoring the audit findings and continuing with the current, less secure configuration would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a disregard for established security best practices and a failure to address identified vulnerabilities, potentially exposing the organization to data breaches and noncompliance with data protection regulations. This passive stance is professionally negligent. A third incorrect approach, such as attempting to implement complex, custom security configurations without proper planning or testing, could also be professionally unacceptable. While well-intentioned, this could introduce new vulnerabilities or create unmanageable support burdens, ultimately failing to achieve the desired security outcomes and potentially violating the principle of due diligence in IT management. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the audit findings, a comprehensive assessment of the current endpoint environment, and a clear understanding of the organization's risk tolerance and business objectives. Professionals should prioritize security controls based on their potential impact and feasibility, engage with stakeholders to gather input and manage expectations, and adopt a phased implementation strategy with continuous monitoring and feedback loops. This iterative approach ensures that security solutions are effective, sustainable, and aligned with organizational goals, while adhering to relevant regulatory and ethical standards. Question 9. The control framework reveals a critical decision point regarding the security posture of remote employee devices accessing sensitive corporate applications. Given the organization's commitment to data protection regulations and the need to maintain employee productivity, which of the following approaches best balances these competing requirements within the Workspace ONE Unified Endpoint Management Framework? Option A. Lock all access to corporate resources from any device not fully managed and enrolled within the Workspace ONE UEM environment, even if personal devices meet security standards. Option B. Allow unrestricted access to all corporate resources from any device, regardless of its security configuration, to maximize employee flexibility. Option C. Implement dynamic, risk-based access policies that assess device compliance and user context in real time, granting access only when security thresholds are met. Option D. Rely on employees to self-report the security status of their personal devices, with no automated verification of compliance. The correct answer is C. Implement dynamic, risk-based access policies that assess device compliance and user context in real time, granting access only when security thresholds are met. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in unified endpoint management, balancing security posture with user productivity and data accessibility. In this scenario, the challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of access control for sensitive corporate data when employees are working remotely and utilizing personal devices. The organization must adhere to its internal security policies, which are informed by regulatory requirements for data protection and privacy, without unduly hindering business operations. The correct approach involves implementing a risk-based access control strategy that leverages Workspace ONE capabilities to dynamically assess device posture and user context before granting access to sensitive applications and data. This aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing data security and compliance while enabling a flexible work environment. Workspace ONE conditional access policies, device compliance checks, and granular application control are key components of this strategy. This approach ensures that access is granted only when the device meets predefined security standards, e.g., up-to-date OS, encryption enabled, no jailbreaking/rooting, and the user is authenticated appropriately, thereby minimizing the risk of unauthorized access or data exfiltration. This directly supports compliance with data protection regulations by ensuring data is accessed only through secure and controlled channels. An incorrect approach would be to grant unrestricted access to all corporate resources from any device, regardless of its security status. This fails to meet regulatory obligations for data protection and privacy, as it exposes sensitive information to potential compromise. Such a lax policy would likely violate data breach notification laws and could lead to significant fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to implement overly restrictive policies that block access to essential resources from any device not managed by the organization, even if the personal device is configured with robust security measures. While seemingly secure, this approach can severely impact employee productivity and lead to workarounds that bypass IT controls, creating shadow IT environments that are even more difficult to secure and monitor. This can also lead to employee dissatisfaction and hinder the organization's ability to attract and retain talent in a flexible work landscape. Ethically, it can be seen as an overreach if it prevents employees from performing their duties effectively without a clear, demonstrable security risk. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on user-reported device security status without any automated verification. This approach is highly susceptible to human error and intentional misrepresentation, leaving the organization vulnerable. It fails to meet the due diligence expected under data protection regulations, which require proactive and verifiable security measures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, considering the sensitivity of the data, the threat landscape, and the business impact of potential security incidents. This should be followed by an evaluation of the available technological solutions, such as those offered by Workspace ONE, to implement controls that are both effective and practical. Regular review and adaptation of policies based on evolving threats and business needs are also crucial. Question 10. Market research demonstrates that a new third-party application, designed for collaborative document editing, is gaining traction among employees for its perceived efficiency gains. However, The application handles sensitive, non-public company information. As a Workspace ONE Unified Endpoint Management Specialist, you need to determine the most appropriate security posture for this application across managed devices. Option A. Rely solely on user-reported security concerns to dictate the level of security controls applied to the application, without independent technical validation. Option B. Deploy the most restrictive security profile available within Workspace ONE for all applications that handle any form of company data, to ensure maximum security coverage. Option C. Implement a granular security policy that restricts the application's access to sensitive data based on a risk assessment of the application's data handling practices and the specific types of sensitive information it processes, while allowing broader access for less sensitive data. Option D. Block the application entirely on all managed devices until a comprehensive security audit can be completed, regardless of the application's actual risk profile or user productivity needs. The correct answer is C. Implement a granular security policy that restricts the application's access to sensitive data based on a risk assessment of the application's data handling practices and the specific types of sensitive information it processes, while allowing broader access for less sensitive data. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in unified endpoint management, balancing the need for robust security controls with user productivity and the potential for overreach. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the Workspace ONE Unified Endpoint Management Specialist framework and its associated regulatory guidelines to a real-world situation where user data privacy and operational efficiency are in tension. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security measures are both effective and compliant, without unduly impacting the user experience or violating privacy expectations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based, data-driven decision-making process that aligns with the principles of least privilege and data minimization, which are foundational to many regulatory frameworks governing data privacy and security. By first assessing the actual risk posed by the specific application and its data, and then implementing controls proportionate to that risk, the organization avoids unnecessary restrictions and maintains user trust. This aligns with the spirit of regulations that aim to protect individuals' data while enabling legitimate business operations. An incorrect approach that involves broadly restricting all applications without a specific risk assessment fails to adhere to the principle of proportionality. This can lead to unnecessary operational friction and user dissatisfaction, potentially impacting productivity. From a regulatory perspective, such a blanket restriction might be challenged as overly broad and not justified by a demonstrable risk, potentially leading to complaints or audits. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on user feedback without independent technical validation risks misinterpreting the actual security posture. User perceptions of risk may not always align with technical vulnerabilities. This could lead to either insufficient security measures or the implementation of controls that are not technically necessary, both of which are professionally unsound. A third incorrect approach that involves implementing the most stringent security control available without considering the impact on usability or the actual risk is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of nuanced understanding of the Workspace ONE framework and its practical application. It prioritizes a theoretical maximum security over a balanced and effective solution, potentially leading to user workarounds that undermine security altogether. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the objective. Clearly define the business need and the desired outcome. 2. Identify the risks. Assess potential threats and vulnerabilities related to the application and its data. 3. Evaluate available controls. Understand the capabilities of Workspace ONE and other relevant security tools. 4. Consider the impact. Analyze the potential effects of controls on user productivity, privacy, and operational efficiency. 5. Consult relevant policies and regulations. Ensure all proposed actions comply with internal policies and external legal/regulatory requirements. 6. Implement and monitor. Deploy chosen controls and continuously monitor their effectiveness and impact. 7. Iterate and refine. Be prepared to adjust controls based on ongoing monitoring and evolving risk landscapes. Question 11. System analysis indicates a critical security vulnerability has been identified requiring immediate patching across all managed endpoints. The organization utilizes Workspace One Unified Endpoint Management to manage a diverse fleet of Windows, Mac OS, and Android devices. Given the urgency and the potential for widespread impact, what is the most professional and effective approach to deploying this critical security update? Option A. Initiate a phased deployment, starting with a small pilot group of diverse devices to validate the update's stability and compatibility before proceeding with a broader rollout. Option B. Rely on users to manually initiate the update when prompted or during their next scheduled check-in to ensure minimal disruption to their workflow. Option C. Immediately push the security update to all managed devices simultaneously to ensure the fastest possible remediation of the vulnerability. Option D. Deploy the update only to devices that are currently online and accessible, assuming that offline devices will eventually receive it when they reconnect. The correct answer is A. Initiate a phased deployment, starting with a small pilot group of diverse devices to validate the update's stability and compatibility before proceeding with a broader rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Unified Endpoint Management (UEM), where a critical security update needs to be deployed across a diverse fleet of devices, including those with varying operating system versions and user-defined configurations. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the security patch with the potential for disruption to end-user productivity and the need to maintain compliance with internal IT policies and potentially external regulatory requirements. Though for this exam, we focus solely on the UEM specialist's technical and procedural adherence within the Workspace One framework. The risk of widespread system instability or data loss due to an aggressive, unmanaged deployment necessitates a structured, risk-aware approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased deployment strategy, beginning with a pilot group. This aligns with best practices for UEM and IT change management. Within the Workspace One framework, this translates to leveraging smart groups and staged rollouts. This method allows for the validation of the update's compatibility and stability on a representative subset of devices before a full-scale deployment. It minimizes the blast radius of any unforeseen issues, enabling timely remediation without impacting the entire organization. This approach is professionally sound as it demonstrates due diligence, risk mitigation, and a commitment to operational continuity, all of which are implicit in the responsibilities of a UEM specialist. Incorrect approach is analysis. Deploying the update immediately to all devices without any prior testing or staging is a direct violation of prudent IT operational procedures and carries a high risk of widespread disruption. This approach fails to account for potential incompatibilities or unforeseen bugs, leading to potential data loss or system downtime, which could have significant business and reputational consequences. Implementing the update only on devices that are currently online and accessible, without a mechanism to ensure all devices eventually receive it, creates security gaps. Devices that are offline during the initial deployment window would remain vulnerable. This approach is incomplete and fails to achieve the objective of securing the entire endpoint fleet. Waiting for user-initiated updates or for devices to report in for their next scheduled check-in without actively pushing the update is an abdication of the UEM specialist's responsibility to proactively manage security. This passive approach relies on user action or system availability, which cannot be guaranteed, leaving the organization exposed to threats for an extended period. Professional reasoning. Professionals in UEM must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and mitigation. This involves understanding the potential impact of any change, identifying critical assets, and planning for phased rollouts. The Workspace One platform provides the tools to implement such strategies through features like smart groups, assignment groups, and staged deployments. A UEM specialist should always consider the what-ifs and design deployment plans that allow for monitoring, rollback, and iterative refinement. The goal is to achieve security objectives efficiently and effectively while minimizing operational disruption and maintaining user productivity. Question 12. The monitoring system demonstrates that unauthorized applications have been installed on a significant percentage of endpoints managed by Workspace One, some of which are used to access sensitive customer data. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Log the alert and continue monitoring, assuming the unauthorized applications pose no immediate significant risk to data security or compliance. Option B. Proceed with a mass remote wipe of all devices exhibiting unauthorized application installations to ensure complete data security. Option C. Immediately disable or quarantine the identified unauthorized applications across all affected devices and initiate a formal investigation into their nature and impact, while preparing clear communication for affected users. Option D. Inform users via a broad email that unauthorized applications are detected and instruct them to uninstall any such software within 24 hours, without further immediate action from IT. Correct answer is C. Immediately disable or quarantine the identified unauthorized applications across all affected devices and initiate a formal investigation into their nature and impact, while preparing clear communication for affected users. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between maintaining a secure and compliant endpoint environment and the potential for user privacy concerns. The discovery of unauthorized applications on a significant number of devices, especially those handling sensitive data, necessitates immediate action. The challenge lies in balancing the need for security and compliance with the potential impact on user productivity and the perception of surveillance. A hasty or overly aggressive response could alienate users and lead to a breakdown in trust, while inaction could expose the organization to significant security risks and regulatory penalties. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both effective in mitigating risk and considerate of user impact. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased and transparent strategy. Initially, the focus should be on immediate risk mitigation by disabling or quarantining the identified unauthorized applications. This is crucial for preventing potential data breaches or compliance violations. Concurrently, initiating a formal investigation to understand the scope, nature, and impact of these applications is paramount. This investigation should involve IT security, compliance, and potentially legal teams. Communicating the situation and the planned actions to affected users in a clear and concise manner, explaining the security rationale without being overly alarming, is essential for maintaining transparency and trust. Finally, updating policies and providing user education on acceptable software usage and the consequences of non-compliance reinforces the organization's security posture and empowers users to make informed decisions. This approach aligns with best practices in cybersecurity and IT governance, emphasizing a proactive, risk-based, and communicative strategy. It respects the need for security while aiming to minimize disruption and maintain user confidence. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that immediately proceeds to mass device wiping without prior investigation or user notification is professionally unacceptable. This would represent a severe overreaction, potentially causing significant data loss for users and disrupting business operations. It fails to consider the possibility that some unauthorized applications might be benign or have a legitimate, albeit unapproved, business purpose. Such an action would likely violate user privacy expectations and could lead to significant employee dissatisfaction and potential legal challenges related to data loss. Furthermore, it bypasses the necessary due diligence required to understand the root cause of the issue. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the alert entirely, assuming it is a false positive or a minor issue. This demonstrates a critical failure in risk management and adherence to security protocols. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and cybersecurity, mandate proactive identification and mitigation of security threats. Ignoring such alerts exposes the organization to significant compliance risks, potential data breaches, and reputational damage. It also undermines the effectiveness of the monitoring system itself. A third incorrect approach would be to only disable the applications without any communication or investigation. While this addresses the immediate security concern, it fails to educate users, understand the underlying reasons for the unauthorized installations, or update policies. This reactive measure does not foster a culture of security awareness and leaves the organization vulnerable to repeat occurrences. It also misses an opportunity to address potential gaps in approved software lists or user training. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment, compliance, and stakeholder communication. This involves 1. Understanding the immediate threat and its potential impact. 2. Consulting relevant policies, regulatory requirements, and legal counsel. 3. Developing a phased response plan that balances security needs with operational impact. 4. Ensuring transparency and clear communication with affected parties. 5. Documenting all actions taken and lessons learned for continuous improvement. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and aligned with organizational objectives and ethical responsibilities. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new regulatory mandate requires stricter controls over the handling of sensitive customer data on all corporate-issued mobile devices managed by Workspace One. What is the most appropriate initial step to ensure compliance while minimizing disruption to end users and business operations? Option A. Immediately deploy a new, highly restrictive data encryption policy across all managed devices to ensure absolute data protection. Option B. Begin technical implementation of the new data handling requirements based on initial interpretations of the regulatory text. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify affected systems, data, users, and business processes, and to evaluate potential risks and benefits of proposed changes. Option D. Consult with a select group of power users to understand their current workflows and how the new policy might affect them. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify affected systems, data, users, and business processes, and to evaluate potential risks and benefits of proposed changes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Unified Endpoint Management, UEM, where a new regulatory requirement necessitates a change in how sensitive data is handled on managed devices. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for compliance with the potential impact on user productivity and the existing operational workflows. A hasty or ill-considered approach can lead to significant disruption, security vulnerabilities, or non-compliance. The requirement for an impact assessment is critical because it forces a proactive and structured evaluation of all potential consequences before implementing a solution. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment. This process, aligned with best practices for regulatory compliance and IT governance, ensures that all facets of the organization are considered. It involves identifying affected systems, user groups, data types, and business processes. Crucially, it requires evaluating the potential risks and benefits of proposed changes, including the impact on end-user experience, IT support, and overall operational efficiency. This methodical approach allows for the identification of potential conflicts with existing policies or technologies and facilitates the development of mitigation strategies. By understanding the full scope of the impact, IT professionals can design and implement a compliant solution that minimizes disruption and maximizes effectiveness, thereby adhering to the spirit and letter of regulatory frameworks that mandate data protection and security. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the new data handling policy without a prior impact assessment represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses the due diligence required to ensure compliance and protect sensitive information. This approach risks unintended consequences, such as data breaches due to inadequate security controls or operational disruptions that could lead to business losses. It also fails to consider the user experience, potentially leading to widespread dissatisfaction and workarounds that further compromise security. Focusing solely on technical implementation without considering the broader business and user impact is another failure. While technical feasibility is important, it does not guarantee regulatory adherence or operational success. This narrow focus can lead to solutions that are technically sound but fail to meet compliance mandates or are impractical for end users, thus creating new problems. Prioritizing immediate compliance over a thorough assessment, even with good intentions, can lead to a rushed and incomplete solution. This might involve implementing controls that are overly restrictive, causing significant productivity loss, or, conversely, controls that are insufficient, leaving the organization vulnerable. Such an approach fails to demonstrate a commitment to a balanced and sustainable compliance strategy. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with new regulatory requirements must adopt a structured decision-making process. This begins with understanding the specific mandates of the regulation. Next, a comprehensive impact assessment should be initiated to identify all potential consequences of compliance. This assessment should involve stakeholders from IT, security, legal, and relevant business units. Based on the findings of the impact assessment, a strategy for implementation should be developed, prioritizing solutions that achieve compliance while minimizing negative impacts on productivity and security. Continuous monitoring and review are essential to ensure ongoing adherence and to adapt to evolving regulatory landscapes and technological advancements. Question 14. The performance metrics show a slight but consistent increase in application load times across a segment of the user base following the recent deployment of a new Workspace 1 security policy designed to enhance data exfiltration prevention. User feedback indicates frustration with the perceived slowdown. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Workspace 1 administrator? Option A. Prioritize addressing user complaints by temporarily suspending the new security policy for the affected user segment until further notice. Option B. Immediately roll back the recently deployed security policy to restore optimal application performance and address user complaints. Option C. Initiate a detailed investigation into the specific components of the security policy and the affected applications to identify the root cause of the performance impact, correlating it with the security benefits provided. Option D. Disable specific security features within the policy on a per-user or per-application basis, where performance complaints are most frequent, without a formal review. The correct answer is C. Initiate a detailed investigation into the specific components of the security policy and the affected applications to identify the root cause of the performance impact, correlating it with the security benefits provided. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Unified Endpoint Management, UEM, where the effectiveness of a security policy is questioned due to perceived user impact. The professional challenge lies in balancing robust security requirements with operational efficiency and user experience, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations. The need for deep analysis arises from the potential for misinterpreting performance metrics, leading to either an overreaction that compromises security or an underreaction that leaves the organization vulnerable. The specific jurisdiction for this exam is U.S. federal regulations pertaining to government contractors and sensitive data handling, which mandates a risk-based approach to security controls. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation that considers the full context of the performance metrics and the underlying security policy. This aligns with the principles of NIST SB 800-53, which emphasizes continuous monitoring and assessment of security controls. Best professional practice dictates that before any policy modification or rollback, a thorough analysis should be conducted to understand the root cause of any performance degradation. This includes examining logs, correlating events, and potentially engaging with affected user groups to gather qualitative feedback. The justification for this approach is rooted in the regulatory requirement to maintain effective security controls and to demonstrate due diligence in their implementation and management. A risk assessment would be performed to determine if the observed performance issues pose a greater risk than the security posture provided by the policy. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a broad rollback of the security policy without a thorough investigation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses the established risk management framework and could expose sensitive data to unauthorized access or modification, directly contravening regulations like FISMA, Federal Information Security Modernization Act, which requires agencies to implement security controls commensurate with the risk. It also demonstrates a lack of professional diligence in managing security controls. Disabling specific security features on a case-by-case basis based on anecdotal user complaints, without a formal risk assessment or policy review, is also professionally unacceptable. This creates an inconsistent security posture, making it difficult to ensure compliance and potentially leaving gaps in protection. This ad hoc approach undermines the principle of least privilege and can lead to unauthorized access or data breaches, violating the spirit and letter of data protection regulations. Focusing solely on user complaints without validating the performance metrics or assessing the security implications is another failure. While user experience is important, it cannot supersede the organization's obligation to protect sensitive information as mandated by federal regulations. This approach prioritizes convenience over security, creating a significant compliance risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals in UEM must adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes risk assessment and compliance. When faced with performance issues potentially linked to security policies, the first step is always to gather comprehensive data and analyze it objectively. This involves understanding the security objectives of the policy, the specific metrics observed, and the potential impact of any changes. A formal risk assessment should then be conducted to weigh the security benefits of the policy against the operational impact. Any proposed modifications should be documented, approved through a change management process, and their impact on the overall security posture reevaluated. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are defensible, compliant with regulatory requirements, and aligned with the organization's overall security strategy. Question 15. Assessment of how Workspace ONE Unified Endpoint Management can be configured to enforce data protection policies on corporate-owned devices while respecting user privacy and maintaining productivity, considering U.S. regulatory frameworks. Option A. Disable all remote wipe capabilities for corporate-owned devices to avoid accidental data loss for users. Option B. Prohibit all personal use of corporate-owned devices through a blanket policy to minimize any potential data leakage. Option C. Implement granular conditional access policies based on device posture and user authentication, coupled with Workspace ONE data loss prevention features to restrict sensitive data handling within approved applications. Option D. Enforce a strict blacklist of all non-essential applications to prevent unauthorized software installations. Correct answer is C. Implement granular conditional access policies based on device posture and user authentication, coupled with Workspace ONE data loss prevention features to restrict sensitive data handling within approved applications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in unified endpoint management, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with user productivity and privacy. Organizations must implement policies that effectively protect corporate data and systems while minimizing disruption to end users. The challenge lies in defining the appropriate level of control and visibility without infringing on user expectations or violating privacy regulations, especially when dealing with personal devices or data on corporate endpoints. The specific regulatory framework for this exam, 5v0-61-19, implies a focus on U.S. regulations and best practices within the context of Workspace ONE. Therefore, understanding how Workspace ONE features can be configured to meet these requirements is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging Workspace ONE granular policy controls to enforce security baselines and compliance requirements without resorting to overly restrictive measures. This includes implementing conditional access policies that grant access based on device posture, user authentication, and application context. Furthermore, utilizing Workspace ONE data loss prevention (DLP) features, such as restricting copy/paste or app-to-app data sharing for sensitive applications, directly addresses the need to protect corporate data. This approach aligns with U.S. regulatory principles that emphasize data protection and security, while also acknowledging the importance of user privacy and operational efficiency. It demonstrates a mature understanding of UEM capabilities to achieve a balance, which is a hallmark of professional practice in this domain. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a blanket policy that prohibits all personal use of corporate-owned devices, regardless of the nature of the use or the data involved, is overly restrictive. This approach fails to acknowledge that some limited personal use might be acceptable and could lead to user dissatisfaction and potential circumvention of policies. It also doesn't leverage Workspace ONE capabilities for more nuanced control. Enforcing strict application blacklisting without a clear business justification or a process for exceptions is another problematic approach. This can hinder user productivity by blocking legitimate and necessary applications. It also demonstrates a lack of understanding of how to tailor policies to specific organizational needs and risk appetites, which is a key aspect of professional UEM management. Disabling all remote wipe capabilities for corporate-owned devices, even in cases of suspected security breaches or lost devices, represents a significant security and compliance failure. This directly contradicts the need to protect corporate assets and sensitive data, potentially leading to severe regulatory penalties and reputational damage. It ignores the fundamental security controls expected in a UEM solution. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach UEM policy development by first understanding the organization's risk tolerance, compliance obligations, e.g., HIPAA, GDPR if applicable, though focusing on US for this exam, and business requirements. This involves a risk-based assessment to identify critical data and applications. Workspace ONE capabilities should then be mapped to these requirements, prioritizing granular controls over broad restrictions. A phased rollout and continuous monitoring of policy effectiveness and user impact are crucial. Regular review and updates to policies based on evolving threats and business needs are also essential for maintaining a secure and productive environment. Question 16. Comparative studies suggest that when implementing a Workspace ONE UEM strategy for a hybrid workforce with both corporate-owned and BYOD devices, a key challenge is to balance stringent security requirements with user productivity and device diversity. Considering U.S. regulatory frameworks that mandate data protection and access controls, which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for managing endpoint security and compliance? Option A. Prioritize user convenience by disabling most security features on BYOD devices to encourage adoption and minimize user complaints, relying solely on network-level security for protection. Option B. Implement context-aware security policies within Workspace ONE that dynamically adjust security controls based on device type, operating system, user role, and network location, while ensuring essential business functions are not unduly impeded. Option C. Develop and enforce a single, highly restrictive security policy across all enrolled devices, regardless of ownership or intended use, to ensure maximum security coverage. Option D. Apply security policies only to corporate-owned devices and allow BYOD devices to operate with minimal to no security oversight from the UEM solution. The correct answer is C. Develop and enforce a single, highly restrictive security policy across all enrolled devices, regardless of ownership or intended use, to ensure maximum security coverage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a diverse user base and a variety of endpoint devices. The challenge lies in implementing a unified endpoint management (UEM) strategy that adheres to regulatory compliance frameworks without unduly hindering user productivity or introducing compatibility issues. Specifically, the 5v0-6119 exam focuses on Workspace ONE, implying a need to understand its capabilities in enforcing security policies across different operating systems and device types, while also considering the implications of data privacy and access controls, as mandated by relevant U.S. regulations. The professional must navigate the complexities of policy enforcement, device enrollment, and ongoing management to ensure both security and usability. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging Workspace ONE granular policy engine to create context-aware security profiles. This means defining policies that are tailored to specific device types, operating system versions, user roles, and network conditions. For instance, stricter policies might be applied to corporate-owned devices accessing sensitive data, while more flexible policies could be used for BYOD devices with limited access. This approach aligns with U.S. regulatory frameworks such as HIPAA for healthcare data or SOX for financial data, which mandate appropriate safeguards for sensitive information, and the NIST cybersecurity framework, which emphasizes risk management and adaptive security controls. By implementing context-aware policies, the organization can achieve a strong security posture while minimizing disruption to legitimate business operations, thereby representing best professional practice in UEM. Incorrect approaches analysis. Applying a single, overly restrictive security policy to all devices and users is an incorrect approach. This fails to account for the varying risk profiles of different device types and user access needs, potentially leading to unnecessary operational friction and user dissatisfaction. From a regulatory perspective, while it might appear to be a strong security measure, it could also be deemed overly burdensome and not risk-based, which is a principle often embedded in compliance guidelines. Furthermore, it may not adequately address specific threats targeting particular device types or operating systems. Implementing a policy that prioritizes user convenience over security, such as disabling all security features on BYOD devices, is also an incorrect approach. This directly contravenes U.S. data protection regulations and best practices, as it exposes sensitive corporate data to significant risks. Organizations have a legal and ethical responsibility to protect data, regardless of the device it resides on, especially if that data is subject to regulatory oversight. Failing to regularly review and update security policies based on evolving threats and new device enrollments is another incorrect approach. The threat landscape is dynamic, and UEM solutions require continuous adaptation. Stale policies can create security gaps that attackers can exploit, leading to potential data breaches and regulatory noncompliance. This lack of proactive management is a failure in due diligence and risk mitigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to UEM policy development. This involves understanding the organization's data assets, the regulatory requirements governing that data, and the potential threats to those assets. The decision-making process should prioritize the implementation of security controls that are proportionate to the identified risks. This includes 1. Risk assessment. Identify sensitive data and associated regulatory obligations. 2. Policy design. Develop granular, context-aware security policies that address specific risks for different device types, user groups, and access scenarios. 3. Implementation and enforcement. Utilize Workspace ONE capabilities to deploy and enforce these policies consistently. 4. Monitoring and auditing. Continuously monitor device compliance, audit policy effectiveness, and log security events. 5. Review and adaptation. Regularly review and update policies in response to new threats, vulnerabilities, and changes in business requirements or regulatory landscapes. This systematic process ensures that security measures are effective, compliant, and aligned with business objectives, fostering a secure and productive endpoint environment. Question 17. Stakeholder feedback indicates that recent security policy deployments via Workspace ONE UEM have led to significant user complaints regarding application access and workflow disruptions. Considering the need to maintain a strong security posture while ensuring business continuity, which of the following approaches best balances these competing demands and aligns with professional best practices for UEM implementation? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the implemented security policies. Identify specific conflicts with critical business applications and user workflows, and then implement targeted adjustments in a phased manner, starting with a pilot group. Option B. Mandate that all users undergo mandatory retraining on how to use applications with the new security policies in place, regardless of the actual policy conflicts. Option C. Immediately roll back all recently implemented security policies and revert to the previous configuration to address user complaints. Option D. Prioritize the most aggressive security settings recommended by the vendor and enforce them universally across all endpoints without further testing or user consultation. The correct answer is C. Immediately roll back all recently implemented security policies and revert to the previous configuration to address user complaints. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between enhancing security posture and maintaining user productivity and access to critical business applications. Organizations implementing Workspace ONE UEM must balance the need for robust security controls with the operational realities of their workforce. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing security policies that are effective without causing undue disruption or hindering legitimate business operations, which can lead to user frustration and workarounds that bypass security. The specific regulatory framework for this exam, 5v0-61-19, implies a focus on U.S. regulations and best practices within the context of endpoint management. Therefore, any proposed solution must align with general U.S. data privacy principles and common industry standards for endpoint security, without referencing specific U.S. federal laws unless directly applicable to UEM implementation in a general sense. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout of security policies, starting with a pilot group and incorporating user feedback. This aligns with best professional practice by allowing for iterative refinement of security configurations. By testing policies on a smaller scale, potential conflicts with business applications or user workflows can be identified and addressed before widespread deployment. This proactive approach minimizes disruption and ensures that security measures are both effective and practical. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, This method demonstrates due diligence in protecting organizational data while respecting user productivity, a key consideration in maintaining operational integrity. It also allows for better compliance with general data protection principles by ensuring that security measures are not overly burdensome and do not inadvertently lead to data exposure through user workarounds. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a blanket, immediate enforcement of all security policies without prior testing or user consultation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the potential impact on user productivity and the functionality of critical business applications. It can lead to widespread user dissatisfaction, increased help desk calls, and potentially the circumvention of security policies by users seeking to regain access or functionality, thereby undermining the very security objectives. This is professionally unacceptable as it lacks foresight and a user-centric perspective, which are crucial for successful technology adoption and compliance. Deploying security policies based solely on vendor recommendations without considering the specific organizational context and existing application landscape is another failure. While vendor recommendations are valuable, they are often generic. Failing to tailor these to the specific environment can result in incompatible configurations, leading to application failures and security gaps. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the unique risks and operational requirements of the organization, which is a professional failing. Focusing exclusively on the most stringent security controls without any consideration for user impact or business necessity is also problematic. While security is paramount, an overly restrictive approach can render endpoints unusable for their intended business purpose. This can lead to a situation where users are unable to perform their jobs, creating a significant business risk and potentially leading to pressure to relax security measures, thus creating a less secure environment overall. This approach fails to strike a balance which is essential for sustainable security. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, iterative approach to UEM security policy implementation. This involves 1. Understanding the organization's specific business needs and application landscape. 2. Identifying critical data and assets to be protected. 3. Assessing potential security risks and vulnerabilities. 4. Developing security policies that address identified risks while minimizing impact on productivity. 5. Piloting new policies with a representative user group to gather feedback and identify issues. 6. Iteratively refining policies based on pilot results and user feedback. 7. Planning for phased, organization-wide deployment with clear communication and support. 8. Establishing ongoing monitoring and review processes to adapt to evolving threats and business needs. This systematic approach ensures that security measures are effective, compliant, and practical, fostering a secure and productive work environment. Question 18. To address the challenge of a remote user experiencing critical application issues on their corporate tissue device, which requires immediate troubleshooting, what is the most appropriate and compliant method for IT support to gain visibility and control of the user's endpoint? Option A. Access the user's device remotely without explicit consent, based on the urgency of the reported critical application issue. Option B. Initiate a secure remote control session through Workspace 1, requiring explicit user consent and ensuring the session is logged for audit purposes. Option C. Instruct the user to factory reset their device and reinstall all applications to resolve the unknown application issue. Option D. Provide the user with a temporary administrative password to log into their device directly and troubleshoot the issue themselves. Correct answer is B. Initiate a secure remote control session through Workspace 1, requiring explicit user consent and ensuring the session is logged for audit purposes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between an organization's desire for efficient data access and the stringent requirements for data privacy and security mandated by regulatory frameworks. The need to provide timely support to a remote user must be balanced against the risk of unauthorized access or data exfiltration, especially when dealing with sensitive information. The complexity arises from the need to implement controls that are both effective and minimally disruptive to user productivity, while remaining compliant with applicable regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging Workspace 1 capabilities to provide secure, temporary, and auditable remote access to the user's device. This aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing data security and privacy. Specifically, utilizing features that allow for remote control or screen sharing with explicit user consent, and ensuring that such sessions are logged and monitored, directly addresses regulatory requirements for data protection and accountability. This method ensures that access is granted only when necessary, for a limited duration, and with a clear audit trail, thereby minimizing risk and maintaining compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to grant unrestricted administrative access to the user's device without proper justification or oversight. This fails to meet regulatory requirements for data minimization and access control, creating a significant security vulnerability and potential for data breaches. It also violates ethical principles of responsible data handling. Another incorrect approach would be to deny the user access to their device entirely, even for critical support needs, citing privacy concerns without exploring alternative compliance solutions. This is professionally unsound as it hinders business operations and fails to provide necessary support, potentially leading to user frustration and productivity loss. It also demonstrates a lack of understanding of how to balance security with operational needs within a regulatory framework. A third incorrect approach would be to rely on informal or ad hoc methods of support, such as asking the user to describe the issue in detail without any form of remote verification or control. While seemingly privacy-preserving, this method is inefficient, prone to misinterpretation, and lacks the necessary auditability to satisfy regulatory compliance. It also fails to address the root cause of the problem effectively. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, always considering the regulatory landscape and the sensitivity of the data involved. When faced with a support request that requires device access, the decision-making process should involve 1. Assessing the urgency and nature of the issue. 2. Identifying the minimum level of access required. 3. Evaluating available tools and features within Workspace, one that can provide secure and auditable access. 4. Obtaining explicit user consent. And 5. Ensuring that all actions are logged for compliance and security review. This systematic approach ensures that both operational needs and regulatory obligations are met. Question 19. Compliance review shows that the organization's Bring Your Own Device (BYOD) policy for Workspace ONE managed endpoints lacks clear guidelines on data segregation and privacy for employees using personal devices for work, potentially exposing sensitive corporate data and violating employee privacy rights under U.S. federal regulations. Which of the following approaches best addresses these compliance gaps? Option A. Mandate that all personal devices enrolled in Workspace ONE undergo a full device wipe if any policy violation is detected, regardless of whether the violation pertains to corporate or personal data. Option B. Implement a containerization strategy within Workspace ONE to create a secure, encrypted corporate partition on personal devices, separating work data and applications from personal data, and ensuring that corporate policies only apply to the container. Option C. Require unrestricted access to all data and applications on employee-owned devices enrolled in Workspace ONE to ensure complete visibility and control for IT security. Option D. Allow employees to enroll personal devices in Workspace ONE with minimal security requirements, relying on individual user responsibility for data protection and privacy. The correct answer is B. Implement a containerization strategy within Workspace ONE to create a secure, encrypted corporate partition on personal devices, separating work data and applications from personal data, and ensuring that corporate policies only apply to the container. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Unified Endpoint Management, UEM, where the need for robust security and compliance clashes with user privacy expectations and the practicalities of device management. The professional challenge lies in balancing the organization's regulatory obligations for data protection and endpoint security with the rights of employees to privacy on their personal devices, especially when those devices are used for work. Misinterpreting or misapplying the relevant regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of employee trust. The specific jurisdiction for this exam is U.S. federal regulations pertaining to data privacy and endpoint security in a corporate environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing a mobile device management (MDM) solution that leverages a containerization strategy. This aligns with U.S. federal regulations such as HIPAA for healthcare data and NIST guidelines for general cybersecurity best practices, which mandate data protection and access control. Containerization allows for the segregation of corporate data and applications from personal data on the employee's device. This means that while the organization can enforce security policies, access controls, and data encryption on the corporate container, it avoids accessing or monitoring the employee's personal data. This approach respects employee privacy while fulfilling the organization's duty to protect sensitive corporate information and comply with relevant data protection laws. It demonstrates a commitment to a least privilege principle for data access and management. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a full device wipe policy for any noncompliance without considering the scope of data affected is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach could violate employee privacy rights and potentially lead to the accidental deletion of personal data, which could have legal ramifications under various U.S. privacy statutes. It is an overly broad and punitive measure that does not align with the principle of proportionality, often expected in regulatory compliance. Enforcing a policy that requires unrestricted access to all data and applications on the employee's device, regardless of whether it is corporate or personal, is a direct violation of privacy principles and likely contravenes regulations that protect personal information. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of the boundaries between corporate and personal data and the legal requirements to respect those boundaries. It exposes the organization to risks of privacy lawsuits and regulatory fines. Adopting a BYOD policy that has no specific security controls or data segregation mechanisms, relying solely on employee self-governance, is a failure to meet the organization's duty of care under U.S. federal regulations. While it might seem to prioritize user freedom, it leaves corporate data vulnerable and the organization non-compliant with mandates for data protection and endpoint security. This laissez-faire approach creates significant security risks and regulatory exposure. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach BYOD and UEM policy development by first identifying all applicable U.S. federal regulations and industry-specific mandates, e.g., HIPAA, NIST, PCI DSS if applicable. They should then conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand the types of data being managed and the potential threats. Policy development should prioritize a layered security approach that balances organizational needs with employee privacy. This involves exploring technical solutions like containerization and conditional access. Regular training for employees on BYOD policies and security best practices is crucial. Finally, policies should be regularly reviewed and updated to reflect changes in technology, regulations, and the threat landscape. Question 20. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new Workspace 1 UEM feature for enhanced device telemetry collection offers significant operational insights and potential cost savings through proactive issue detection, but also introduces new data privacy considerations and potential exposure points if not configured correctly. Which approach best balances these factors while adhering to regulatory compliance? Option A. Proceed with the immediate deployment of the feature to capitalize on the identified operational benefits, assuming that the vendor's default security settings are sufficient and any potential issues will be addressed reactively. Option B. Implement the feature in a limited pilot group, collect feedback on operational benefits, and defer any detailed security or privacy risk analysis until after the feature has been widely adopted. Option C. Prioritize the cost savings identified in the analysis and deploy the feature with minimal configuration changes, focusing only on the most critical security alerts that the telemetry might generate. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with the new telemetry data, evaluate the impact of these risks on data privacy and security, and implement appropriate mitigation controls before full deployment. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with the new telemetry data, evaluate the impact of these risks on data privacy and security, and implement appropriate mitigation controls before full deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate, tangible benefits of a new security feature against the less quantifiable, but potentially significant, risks associated with its implementation. The organization must make a judgment call that impacts both operational efficiency and its compliance posture. Careful consideration is needed to ensure that the chosen approach aligns with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and documented risk assessment process. This aligns with the principles of proactive security management and demonstrates due diligence. Specifically, within the context of Workspace ONE UEM and its deployment, a structured risk assessment ensures that potential vulnerabilities introduced by new configurations or features are identified, analyzed, and mitigated before they can be exploited. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of endpoint data, which is a core requirement for compliance with data protection regulations. By systematically evaluating threats, vulnerabilities, and the potential impact of each, the organization can make informed decisions about resource allocation for security controls, ensuring that investments are targeted effectively and that residual risks are acceptable. This methodical approach also provides an auditable trail, which is essential for demonstrating compliance to regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings without a commensurate evaluation of security implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct a risk assessment constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. It implies a disregard for the potential for data breaches, unauthorized access, or service disruptions, all of which can lead to severe penalties under data protection laws. Such an approach prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term security and compliance, creating a vulnerability that could result in substantial financial and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing the feature without any form of testing or validation, relying solely on vendor claims, is also professionally unsound. This bypasses critical steps in the risk management lifecycle. It fails to account for the unique configuration of the organization's environment and the potential for unforeseen interactions or misconfigurations that could introduce new risks. Ethically, it is irresponsible to deploy security-impacting changes without verifying their efficacy and safety. This approach risks exposing sensitive data and systems to threats that could have been identified and mitigated through proper testing and risk analysis, leading to potential regulatory noncompliance and a breach of trust with stakeholders. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework typically includes identifying assets and threats, analyzing vulnerabilities, assessing the likelihood and impact of potential incidents, evaluating existing controls, determining residual risk, and developing mitigation strategies. For Workspace ONE UEM deployments, this means considering how new features or configuration changes might affect device security, data privacy, and user access. Professionals should consult relevant security frameworks and regulatory guidance, document all findings and decisions, and obtain appropriate stakeholder approval before proceeding with implementation. This ensures that decisions are not only technically sound, but also ethically responsible and compliant with legal obligations.